Somebody call 911. He's turning blue. Maya Williams screamed as she threw down her mop and ran forward. Gasps broke out across the executive boardroom. Just minutes earlier, Richard Kane, billionaire, CEO, master of this kingdom in the heart of Chicago, had been standing at the head of the long mahogany table, his voice deep and measured as he presented quarterly numbers. Then, in mid-sentence, he'd stopped. His hand shot to his chest. His breath hitched. The room fell into stunned silence as his body convulsed once, twice, and then collapsed to the floor. At first, no one believed it. The executives froze 7 men in tailored suits worth more than Maya's annual salary combined. Someone muttered, "He's joking." Another whispered, "Oh God, call security." And then the truth hit. Richard Kane wasn't moving. His lips were turning blue, but Maya did. She pushed the door open wider and charged in, shoving past the frozen wall of expensive cologne and ego. "Maya, what the hell are you doing?" one man barked. "She doesn't belong here," another snapped. "Get out." "I know CPR," she shouted, but no one cared. Richard Kane was lying on his side, one hand limp against his chest, his lips a frightening shade of bluish gray. He wasn't breathing. Maya dropped to her knees beside him. Sir, can you hear me?" she whispered, panic rising in her throat. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. No pulse. Then she acted. She had taken a free CPR course at the Southside Rec Center just for the grocery voucher. But in that moment, the instructor's voice was clearer in her head than anything else in the room. "If they're not breathing, you are their lungs." She tilted his head back, pinched his nose, and leaned in. "Is she kissing him?" someone shouted. "She's disgusting," another yelled. "Get her off him." A sharp pain seared across her back. Someone had struck her with something hard, a cane, maybe, or an umbrella. She winced but didn't stop. She gave him 2 rescue breaths. Then she locked her hands and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another blow landed on her shoulder. She groaned but kept counting. "You filthy girl!" A voice hissed above her. "Keep your hands off him." The boardroom erupted into chaos around her, but Maya stayed grounded. Her arms burned, her back ached, her eyes stung, but she didn't stop. "Come on," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Don't die on me, not like this." 25, 26, 27. Someone tried pulling at her shoulder. She shrugged them off violently. She leaned in again and gave 2 more breaths. Suddenly, Richard's chest jerked. He coughed violently, then sucked in air like a man pulled from the bottom of the ocean. His eyelids fluttered. He was breathing. Maya sat back, trembling. Her hands were shaking. Her back throbbed where the blows had landed, but he was alive. She had done it. The suits now scrambled to his side, falling over one another in a clumsy panic. "Mr. Kane, Richard, stay with us, sir." No one looked at Maya. The boardroom doors flew open and paramedics rushed in. They quickly took over, assessing vitals, lifting Richard onto a stretcher. One of them turned to the room and asked, "Who started CPR?" "I did," Maya said, her voice faint. Before the medic could respond, a tall man with silver hair stepped forward. His badge read, Edmund Ross, CFO. His face was twisted with revulsion. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Maya Williams," she said, straightening up. "I'm a cleaner." "You put your mouth on Mr. Kane," he said, as though she'd spit on the man instead of saving him. "He wasn't breathing. We'll review the security footage," he interrupted. "You are to leave immediately and not return until contacted." Her throat closed up. Her back still pulsed with pain. She looked around the room at the executives she'd just saved from watching their boss die. Not a single word of thanks. Maya picked up her mop bucket with shaking arms and wheeled it out. Every step away from that room felt heavier than the last. She took the service elevator, alone. She rode the crowded bus home that night, her shoulders hunched, her eyes staring out the window as city lights blurred into long lines. Her neighborhood was quiet when she arrived, just the dull hum of a distant train and the laughter of kids playing stickball in the alley. Her daughter Daisy met her at the door, barefoot, cradling a worn-out teddy bear. "Mama, you're late," she said softly. "You okay?" "I'm fine, baby," Maya lied. "Just a crazy day at work." She tucked Daisy into bed after a simple dinner of boxed mac and cheese and leftover greens. That night, Maya lay on her mattress listening to the radiator hiss. She traced the bruise forming on her back and bit her lip. She had saved a man's life, and all they saw was a poor black janitor laying hands on a white billionaire. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, the moment her hands brought breath back into a dying man, would change everything. Just not the way she expected. The next morning, Maya Williams stood at the front of the Kane Global Tower, wearing the same gray uniform she'd worn every night for the past 3 months. The sun had just risen, casting pale orange light across the plaza. Her hands clutched her lunch bag, a plastic grocery sack holding a peanut butter sandwich, a bruised apple, and the hope that everything would return to normal. She took a breath and stepped toward the revolving door. Before she could reach the handle, a firm arm blocked her path. "Ma'am, you can't go in," said the security guard. Maya blinked. "What? I work here. Night crew. I'm on the 22nd floor." He didn't meet her eyes. "I was told not to let you in." Her stomach twisted. "Why? I haven't done anything wrong." "Check with HR," the guard muttered, already turning away. Maya stood frozen in place, the morning chill biting through her thin sleeves. Pedestrians brushed past, barely sparing her a glance. She felt like a ghost outside the walls that had ignored her for months, except now they saw her, and they wanted her gone. She walked around the building to the rear service entrance. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone forgot to log her return. She'd been told to wait until contacted, but that was for medical review, wasn't it? At the service desk, the night shift supervisor looked up from a clipboard. "Maya Williams?" he said, surprised. "Wait here." She waited in the narrow hallway by the janitor lockers. The walls smelled like bleach and old floor wax. Her name was still scrawled in Sharpie across the top of locker 7. 10 minutes later, the supervisor returned with a sealed envelope and a flat expression. "You're being let go," he said. Maya stared. "Let go? Why? What did I do?" The man shrugged. "HR said it's for inappropriate conduct involving executive staff." That's all they told me. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a check and a letter standard termination notice. Her last paycheck. No severance. No explanation. Just her name, typed in black ink, above a line that said, "Employment terminated immediately. Inappropriate conduct." The words echoed in her head like sirens. She stood in the hallway for a long moment. No one came to talk to her. No one offered a word of comfort. The door to the main lobby swung shut behind her like a final sentence. Outside, the world carried on. People in suits sipped lattes, caught taxis, talked on phones. She walked the length of the block without realizing it. Her thoughts churning. They think I did something wrong. They think I... She stopped at the bus shelter and sank onto the bench, her legs suddenly too weak to carry her. A notification buzzed on her phone. A text from someone she barely knew on the night crew. It was a screenshot. A message in a group chat. "Did y'all see this? Girl from janitorial was all over Mr. Kane while he was unconscious. Looked like she was kissing him." Another message followed. "Nasty. That's assault, right?" Maya's chest tightened. Her hands went cold. They'd twisted what happened. The CPR. The breaths that saved his life. They were turning it into something else. Something vile. Her phone vibrated again, another message. Another thread. Now there was a photo. Blurry. Pulled from the security footage. Probably leaked by someone in maintenance. A still image. Maya hunched over Richard Kane. Her face close to his. She dropped the phone onto her lap and stared into the street. Across from her, a billboard showed Richard Kane's face smiling. Arms crossed in front of the skyline. The slogan beneath it read, "Integrity. Vision. Leadership." Her stomach turned. She rode the bus home in silence, pressed against the window as the city grew smaller, harder, grayer. The South Side felt like another planet. Her daughter Daisy met her at the door again. "Mama, you're back early." Maya nodded. They let me go." Daisy's eyes widened. "But why?" "I don't know," she said, forcing a smile. "They just said it was a misunderstanding." Her mother, sitting in the kitchen, turned down the volume on the TV. "You look like you've seen a ghost," the older woman said, concern etched in her brow. "I'm okay, Mama," Maya lied. "Just tired." Later that night, she lay on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The radiator hissed again. Somewhere down the hall, a couple argued. A baby cried. Life moved on around her. She opened her phone once more. The messages hadn't stopped. Some were cruel. Others pretended concern. Most were just whispers. One voice message came from a girl in building services. "Hey, I don't know what happened, but folks are saying you did something real inappropriate with Mr. Kane. Maybe you should keep your head down for a while." She turned off the phone and let it fall beside her. Inappropriate. It was the word people used when they didn't want to see the truth. She remembered how it felt when Richard gasped for breath beneath her hands, the jolt of his body, the life coming back. She had saved a man. And now they treated her like she had touched something forbidden, like her hands were too black, too poor, too wrong to have been part of that moment. She buried her face in her pillow and wept. It was supposed to mean something, saving a life. But here, in this city, in this world, her life was the one being erased. Tomorrow, she would start looking for new work. She'd knock on doors. She'd clean wherever someone would let her. But tonight, the injustice was too heavy to carry, and she couldn't know that somewhere high above, in a penthouse glowing with city light, Richard Kane was sitting up in bed, clutching his chest in a cold sweat, haunted by a stranger's voice calling him back from death. He just didn't know her name yet. If Maya's story touched your heart, tap to show your support and tell us where you're watching from. You might be surprised who's watching this story near you. Richard Kane sat on the edge of his California king bed, drenched in sweat. The early morning light bled through the sheer drapes of his penthouse, brushing pale gold across the sharp lines of the room. His heart pounded beneath his chest like it was trying to claw its way out. The nightmare had returned. For the fourth night in a row, he was standing in a void, choking, arms reaching out into nothing, no light, no sound, until there it was again, that voice. A woman's voice, trembling but firm. "Come on, breathe, come back." Every time, he'd jerk awake, gasping, and every time, the name of the voice's owner slipped just beyond his memory. He rubbed his face and stood, walking barefoot across the marble floor into the kitchen. The coffee maker beeped quietly. Already brewing, his assistant had set the timer the night before. As the dark roast filled the air, Richard leaned on the counter and stared at the city below. Chicago buzzed to life beneath him. Cabs, bicycles, street vendors setting up on corners. He was 39 floors above it all, insulated by glass, wealth, and silence. Yet something didn't feel right. He reached for his phone and scrolled through emails. Contract approvals. Press briefings. A request from a PR firm for a video interview. Nothing about the incident. He clicked into the Kane Global Internal Updates portal. Still nothing. He frowned. Someone had saved his life. The doctors told him so. He had suffered sudden cardiac arrest. The odds of survival in such events were less than 10% without immediate CPR. Someone had kept his heart beating until the paramedics arrived, and no one was telling him who. His executives had been polite, vague. "It's all been handled, sir. Nothing to concern yourself with, Mr. Kane. We've taken proper action internally." The answers made his skin crawl. Who had touched his chest? Who had pressed their lips to his, breathed life back into his lungs? His mind drifted again to the dream. That voice, gentle, shaking, black, young, kept whispering him back from the brink. He could feel her hands again, the pressure on his ribs, the warmth of her breath. Who was she? Why wouldn't anyone tell him? He didn't like being kept in the dark, not in his own company, not about his own life. He picked up his phone and hit a contact. "Lucas," he said when his head of security answered, "I want to see the security footage from the boardroom, the morning of the incident." A pause. "Sir, IHR already reviewed it. Legal has a copy. I don't care. I want it in my inbox. Now." "Yes, sir." Richard ended the call. He stared out the window again, this time seeing nothing but fog on the glass. His reflection looked pale, tired, distant. A man brought back from death, with no memory of the person who saved him. 20 minutes later, the email arrived. He opened the file. There he was, projected in cold, sterile clarity, standing at the head of the long glass conference table, gesturing mid-sentence, then pausing. One hand flew to his chest. His mouth moved, but there was no sound. His body lurched, then crumpled like wet paper. The men around him panicked. Some stood, some shouted, none stepped forward. Then the door at the far end opened. A woman in a gray janitor's uniform entered, wheeling a mop bucket. Richard leaned in. She looked confused at first, then saw him on the floor and dropped everything. Without hesitation, she ran toward him, knelt, checked his pulse. Her hands moved with urgency. She pinched his nose and performed mouth to mouth, pressed down on his chest, counted out loud. He watched her face, the way her jaw clenched, how her eyes brimmed with tears, how she ignored the yelling suits, the pointing fingers. She was focused on one thing, saving him. And then he saw it. A man, Edmund Ross, his chief financial officer, approached her, angry, furious. He grabbed her shoulder and yanked her back. Richard hit pause. His hands were shaking. He watched the rest of the footage in silence. The woman was led away like a criminal. No handshake, no thank you, no recognition. She'd saved his life and been punished for it. Richard stood slowly, his chest tight, not from pain but from rage. He called again. "Lucas," he said, voice low and cold. "Where is Maya Williams?" "Sir?" "The woman in the footage. The janitor. What happened to her?" A beat. "She was let go by HR. There were allegations." "Allegations?" Richard hissed. "She saved my life." Sir, there were concerns about optics, media liability." "Find her," he said. "Find her address. Everything. I want it on my desk by noon." "Yes, Mr. Kane." Richard ended the call and exhaled slowly. He stood in the center of his immaculate kitchen, surrounded by silence, and for the first time since he woke from the hospital bed, he felt something crack beneath his ribs. It wasn't pain. It was shame. Down on the south side, Maya Williams didn't know he'd seen the footage, didn't know he remembered her eyes, didn't know that everything was about to change. But she would. Soon. 3 days passed, and Maya Williams had yet to find work. Her mornings were spent circling job listings in the classifieds with a red pen she'd found in the couch cushions, and her afternoons knocking on doors, laundromats, diners, cleaning agencies anywhere that might pay enough to keep the lights on. But everywhere she went, the answer was the same: a hesitant look, a whisper, and a polite shake of the head. By the fourth morning, her name had become a rumor. At the corner laundromat, a young woman folded shirts and said quietly, "You're that lady from the building, aren't you? The one who—" She stopped mid-sentence when Maya looked up. "Never mind." Maya forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's okay. You can say it. The one who tried to save a man and got fired for it." The woman's lips pressed tight. "People say you did more than that." Maya didn't ask what she meant. She already knew. The internet had turned her act of CPR into something filthy. The headlines on gossip blogs called her the janitor who couldn't keep her hands to herself. Someone had leaked a still from the security camera, grainy, blurry, but damning enough. The image of her lips pressed to Richard Kane's had spread like rot. Back home, the small apartment smelled of old carpet and boiled coffee. Her mother sat by the window reading the newspaper aloud. "City council votes against wage increase again," she muttered, then looked up. "You eat anything?" "Not yet," Maya said, rinsing a cup in the sink. "I'll fix something for Daisy first." The little girl padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, are you going to work today?" "Not today, baby," Maya said softly. "Mama's taking a little time off." "Oh," Daisy frowned. "Grandma said people were mean to you." "Why?" Maya crouched and brushed a curl from her daughter's cheek. "Sometimes people get scared when they don't understand what's good. But it'll be okay." Her mother sighed. "Child, you need to let it go. You can't fight the people who write the stories. They always win." "I don't want to fight," Maya said quietly. "I just want them to tell the truth." That afternoon, she took the bus to a small cleaning service on 18th Street. The owner, an older man with a cigar smell clinging to his shirt, scanned her resume, then set it down. "You worked at Kane Global?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly, then leaned back. "I heard about that situation. I can't have that kind of attention here." "I'm sorry." Maya's throat went dry. "Attention? You mean saving a man's life?" "I mean controversy," he said bluntly. "Clients don't like drama. Try somewhere else." When she stepped outside, the sky was beginning to gray. Wind cut through her jacket as she walked the cracked sidewalk toward the bus stop. A group of teenagers loitered by the corner store, one of them scrolling on his phone. As she passed, he nudged his friend and whispered loud enough for her to hear. "That's her, the janitor chick. Saw the clip she was kissing that rich dude for real." The laughter that followed chased her down the block. By the time she reached the bus shelter, tears stung her eyes. She sat with her head bowed, arms crossed, trying to hold herself together. When she got home, her mother was on the phone, voice low and urgent. She glanced up, covering the receiver. "It's your sister. She says folks at church been talking. They saw some video online." Maya closed her eyes. Of course they did. That night, she tried to delete her social media accounts, but new ones appeared, fake profiles using her picture, cruel captions. "Gold digger janitor seduces her boss. Black woman assaults billionaire." She turned off her phone and sat in the dark until the hum of the refrigerator became the only sound in the apartment. When she finally lay down beside her sleeping daughter, her body throbbed with exhaustion, her back still sore from the blows she'd taken in that boardroom. She pressed a hand against the bruised spot, remembering the sound, the dull crack, the gasp she'd swallowed. "Justice isn't blind," she whispered to herself. "It just refuses to look down." In the middle of the night, the phone rang. She fumbled to answer. "Miss Williams?" The voice was sharp, official. "This is HR from Kane Global. We've concluded our investigation." Her heart leapt. "Does that mean I can—" "You are terminated effective immediately," the woman interrupted. "Our internal review determined your behavior was inappropriate. We won't be pressing charges, but we advise you not to return to the premises." Maya sat up, numb. "Inappropriate? Your contact with Mr. Kane was excessive. The footage speaks for itself." She could barely breathe. "I was giving him CPR. He wasn't breathing. Our decision is final, Miss Williams. You'll receive your last paycheck by mail." The line went dead. For a long time she sat there, the phone pressed to her ear, staring at the shadowed wall. Daisy stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about pancakes. Maya turned toward her daughter and felt her chest ache. What would she tell her in the morning? That her mother lost her job for saving a man's life? That truth didn't matter when you were poor, black, and invisible? She leaned back against the headboard, her eyes burning. "God," she whispered, "if you're listening, what am I supposed to do now?" Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Rain began to patter against the window pane. The leaky gutter dripped a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat mocking. Relentless. Across town, in his penthouse, Richard Kane stared at his laptop. The video had finished playing, but the image of Maya on her knees beside him wouldn't leave his mind. He could see the fear in her face, the determination, the courage, and the horror when she was dragged away. He clicked pause, then leaned back in his chair, every muscle rigid. He'd built an empire on the illusion of control. But this had happened under his roof, under his name. His jaw tightened. "Find her," he murmured to the empty room, "before it's too late." Richard Kane stood alone on the rooftop balcony of his penthouse, the wind tugging gently at his open collar. The city of Chicago stretched endlessly before him, glittering steel, flashing lights, rivers of traffic snaking between towers. To the world below, he was invincible. But tonight, he felt like a man unraveling. He sipped a glass of bourbon he didn't taste. The image of her wouldn't leave his mind. Maya Williams. Her name now etched into his consciousness, carved deep with every second of that video he'd watched again and again. The way her brow furrowed in desperation, the tremble in her arms. The moment his chest rose beneath her hands, the life she forced back into him. She had saved him, and they had destroyed her for it. He'd seen it clearly in the footage, how Edmund had grabbed her, how no one had thanked her. She had been manhandled, dismissed like trash. All under the watch of the people he trusted, the people he paid, the people who let her bleed for him in silence. He clenched his jaw and turned back inside, the city lights trailing across the glass floor. "Alexa," he said sharply, "call Edmund Ross." The digital assistant beeped. The line rang 3 times before a groggy voice picked up. "Sir, it's almost midnight. Don't play innocent with me, Edmund," Richard said, his voice steel. "Tell me what you did to the woman who saved my life." Edmund stammered. "We handled the situation as best we could. There were complications, allegations." There were lies, Richard snapped. You fired her for doing CPR. You buried it. It wasn't that simple. Don't insult my intelligence. Silence. Richard's voice dropped lower, deadlier. I watched the footage. You manhandled her. You stood there, while everyone else did nothing. You called her inappropriate. She saved my life while you stood frozen. Edmund exhaled shakily. Sir, the optics. Richard slammed his hand on the counter, the glass shaking. Get out of my office, Edmund. Pack your things before I forget how long you've worked for me. The call ended. Richard leaned over the kitchen island, breathing hard. His hands trembled not from fear, but from shame. He had died, and she had brought him back. And then they discarded her like she was nothing. He opened his laptop and dialed another number, his personal assistant, Natalie. She picked up instantly, her voice alert. Mr. Kane, I need you to find someone. Her name is Maya Williams. She was a janitor here. Fired last week. A pause. She's the one from the footage, isn't she? Yes. I'll find her, Natalie said. Give me until morning. No, Richard said. Now. He didn't sleep. Not really. He sat in the chair beside the fireplace, laptop on his knees. The video paused on the frame where Maya looked up just as he gasped his first breath. Her eyes had locked on his, if only for a second. There had been something in them, a question, maybe, a quiet plea. Don't forget. By dawn, Natalie called back. I found her, she said. She lives in South Side. Single mom. Apartment in a housing complex with 6 other families. According to the records, she hasn't had power for 2 days. No. Richard's chest tightened. And no one's helped her? No. The cleaning agency blacklisted her. She's being called a predator online. Some tabloid published a story suggesting she assaulted you while you were unconscious. Richard rubbed his forehead. Jesus. There's something else, Natalie added. According to a neighbor, she hasn't been seen outside in 2 days. Her daughter's been asking around for food. That did it. Richard didn't send a driver. He put on jeans, a wool coat, and grabbed his car keys. His black Mercedes slid through the city like a shadow as he headed south, watching the towers fade into brick buildings, faded murals, boarded windows. He hadn't driven himself in years. It felt right. The neighborhood where Maya lived was a world away from the glass and gold realm he ruled. Potholes rattled his wheels. Children played in muddy lots. A man sold hot dogs from a rusted cart, steam billowing into the cold morning. He found the address. A squat brown building with chipped paint and a sagging staircase. He parked and stepped out, the December air biting at his neck. He knocked. A few seconds passed before the door creaked open. A little girl stared up at him. Hair in puffs. T-shirt too thin. Her eyes widened. You're the man from the billboard, she whispered. I'm looking for Maya, Richard said gently. Does she live here? The girl's face crumpled. She's sick, she whispered. She won't wake up. I tried soup. I tried medicine. Nothing works. She keeps saying she's tired. Richard's throat tightened. How long has she been like this? Since the day she got fired, the girl said. She stopped eating. She kept saying it's not fair. And then, she just stopped getting up. Richard pushed the door open. The apartment was small. The walls were faded, the heater barely working. Maya lay on a thin mattress in the corner, wrapped in 2 threadbare blankets. Her face was gaunt, cheeks hollow, her breathing shallow. He knelt beside her. Maya, he whispered. It's me, Richard Kane. She didn't stir. He took her hand. It was hot to the touch, fevered. Call an ambulance, he shouted to the hallway. Now, the little girl watched from the corner, clutching a worn teddy bear. Richard held Maya's hand tighter. You saved my life, he said, voice cracking. Now let me save yours. As the sirens wailed in the distance, he looked down at the woman who had brought him back from death and realized this time he was the one who couldn't afford to lose her. The ambulance pulled up in front of the building with its lights flashing, but no sirens. The paramedics moved swiftly, professionally, asking questions Richard Kane barely registered as they lifted Maya's limp body onto a stretcher. He followed them into the ambulance without hesitation, ignoring the stares of neighbors peering from their windows and porches. Inside the vehicle, The medic clipped a pulse oximeter to Maya's finger and wrapped a cuff around her arm. Severe dehydration. Fevers over 103. Breathing shallow. When did this start? Richard gripped the edge of the bench seat. I don't know. I just found her like this. She's been unconscious since I arrived. No, she's going into systemic stress, the medic muttered, hanging an IV bag on the hook above Maya's head. We need to stabilize her, fast. The ambulance rocked as it turned onto the main road. Richard glanced down at Maya's face, pale and sunken, with beads of sweat shining on her brow. He gently reached over and took her hand again, careful not to disturb the IV. Her fingers didn't respond, but he held them anyway. You fought to keep me alive, he whispered. Don't you dare give up now. The medic looked over, recognition dawning in his eyes. Wait. You're Richard Kane. Richard nodded, his jaw tight. The man glanced at Maya. Is she the one who… Yes. The medic didn't say anything else, but something changed in his eyes, respect, maybe. 20 minutes later, they arrived at a private medical center on the north side, one of the city's best. Richard had called ahead. A team of doctors and nurses met them at the emergency entrance, wheeling Maya away through the double doors. Richard followed until a nurse gently blocked his path. We'll do everything we can, Mr. Kane. Please wait here. He nodded and stepped back, watching until Maya's stretcher disappeared behind swinging doors. The waiting room was pristine leather chairs, warm lighting, a piano playing soft jazz in the corner. But Richard felt like he was underwater. He sat, stood, paced, then sat again. He called Natalie. She's at Northside Medical. I need you to clear my calendar for the next 2 days. And get me her daughter, Daisy. She's alone. I'm on it, Natalie said without hesitation. By the time Daisy arrived with a social worker an hour later, Richard was standing at the window, watching snowflakes drift down over the city skyline. He turned when he heard her voice. Is my mom okay? He knelt to her level. The doctors are helping her now. She's strong. She saved me once, remember? I think she can do it again. Daisy nodded bravely, holding her teddy bear tight. I gave her soup, but she didn't eat it. I tried to be good. You did more than good, he said gently. You took care of her, just like she took care of me. A nurse appeared at the door. Mr. Kane, you can see her now. He rose and took Daisy's hand. Together, they walked down a quiet hallway and into a private room. Maya lay in the hospital bed, an oxygen line under her nose, fluids dripping from the IV beside her. Her chest rose and fell slowly, rhythmically. She's going to be okay, the nurse said softly. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, and malnutrition. Stress-induced immune collapse. But she's responding well. Her vitals are improving. Richard let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Thank you, he said. Daisy walked to the bedside and laid her teddy bear gently on her mother's chest. I told you I took care of her, she whispered. Richard stood beside the bed and looked down at Maya. Her face was softer now, less gray, less broken. He sat in the chair next to her and didn't move for hours. At one point, Daisy fell asleep in the corner, curled into a hospital blanket. Nurses brought warm soup and crackers. Richard barely touched his. He just watched Maya, his thoughts tangled with guilt and disbelief. He remembered the first board meeting she'd walked into, how no one noticed her, how he hadn't noticed her. She had walked through that door invisible, and she had saved his life. It wasn't just CPR, it was defiance, against power, against fear, against a system that expected her to stay quiet and unseen. He couldn't erase what had happened, but he could damn well change what came next. Hours passed, night fell, the only sound was the monitor's steady beep and Daisy's breathing. Then, without warning, Maya stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, her hand twitched. Richard stood up quickly. Maya? Her head turned slightly, eyes opening slowly. She blinked, disoriented, then focused on his face. What? She rasped. Where am I? You're in the hospital, he said gently. You collapsed, but you're safe now. She frowned, her voice barely audible. Why? Why are you here? He knelt beside her, his voice thick. Because I watched the footage. All of it. I saw what you did. You saved my life. And they punished you for it. Maya, I'm so sorry. Tears pooled in her eyes. They said I assaulted you. I know, he said, his jaw clenching. They lied. And I let them lie in my name. But no more. She turned her head away, blinking hard. It didn't matter. I'm just a cleaner. No one believes people like me. I believe you, he said, not just because I saw it, but because I felt it. You were the only one who did anything, the only one who didn't look away. Maya turned back toward him. Her voice was soft, but firm. Then help me, not just with doctors and money. Help me be seen. Help my daughter grow up in a world where doing the right thing doesn't mean losing everything. Richard nodded slowly. I will. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to rest. For the first time in days, maybe longer, Richard stood and looked at her one more time before whispering, You're not invisible anymore. The morning sunlight broke gently through the hospital blinds, painting quiet stripes across the pale blue walls. Maya lay sleeping, her breath steady now, her face no longer ashen but soft and warm. Next to her, Richard Kane sat in the armchair, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the woman who had shaken his entire world by simply doing what no one else dared. He hadn't left her side all night. The weight of guilt still clung to his shoulders like wet cloth, heavy and suffocating. For a man who'd built a billion-dollar empire by making hard decisions and trusting the chain of command, this one had slipped through his fingers like smoke. And it nearly cost someone everything. He pulled out his phone and opened Maya's file again. Natalie had gathered it overnight, every scrap of information available. Pieced together like a puzzle the world had thrown away. Name, Maya Clarice Williams. Age, 29. Education, high school diploma, GED. 1 year of nursing school dropped out due to financial hardship. Employment history, janitorial services, part-time elder care, food delivery. Family, 1 daughter, Daisy, mother, Elena Williams, disabled. Address, South Side, Chicago. Known for high crime, poor infrastructure, and city neglect. There were notes from her former landlord, even a court filing for eviction. She hadn't paid rent in 3 months. Her power had been cut off last week. He swallowed hard, and all of this had happened after she saved his life. Richard stood and stepped into the hallway, where a nurse passed him with a nod. He walked until he found a quiet alcove near the family lounge, pulled out his phone again, and called Natalie. Yes, Mr. Kane? She answered immediately. Send 2 cars to South Side, 1 for her daughter, 1 for her mother. I want them moved to temporary housing, furnished, safe, stocked with groceries. Pick somewhere warm, quiet, close to a good school, and call Dr. Hanley. Tell him I want her mother evaluated today. Full medical review. Done, Natalie said without missing a beat. And Natalie, he added, his voice softer. Make sure there's a crib set up in the new place, just in case Daisy's too scared to sleep alone for a while. There was a pause on the line. Understood, sir. He hung up and returned to Maya's room. She was awake now, propped slightly on the pillow, her eyes still heavy with exhaustion but more alert than the night before. Daisy sat beside her, legs swinging off the edge of the chair, coloring with a set of hospital crayons a nurse had found. She looked up and grinned when she saw Richard. Hi, Mr. Kane. Hi, Daisy. How's your mama doing? She's better. She smiled when I gave her my drawing. Maya turned her head toward him slowly. You came back, she said. I never left, Richard replied. She studied him. You really saw the footage? He nodded. All of it? She asked, more doubt than challenge in her voice. Yes, he said. I watched you fight to save me while everyone else stood there frozen. And then I watched them treat you like a criminal. Maya, I am so sorry. Maya looked away. Sorry doesn't change what they did. No, he agreed. But it's a start. And so is this. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. This is a formal statement, signed and notarized, from me clearing your name and confirming your actions were life-saving and entirely appropriate. No misconduct, no violation. She hesitated before taking it from him. Her fingers shook slightly as she unfolded the page. When her eyes landed on the words, her lips parted just a little. There's more, he said. I've already sent a team to relocate your mother and daughter to a safe, comfortable apartment, rent-free, for as long as you need. Her head snapped up. What? No, no, you don't have to. I do, he interrupted gently, because I let them ruin your life in my name, and I can't undo the pain they caused, but I can make sure you never have to feel like you're alone again. Maya swallowed hard, blinking quickly. Why? Why do you care now? He paused, searching for the right words. Because when I was dying, I didn't see a janitor. I didn't see race, class, status. I saw someone fighting to keep me alive. And after I lived, I let the world erase you. That makes me complicit, and I won't be anymore. Daisy looked up at her mother. See? I told you he was a good guy. Maya let out a breath, part laugh, part sigh. You always were a better judge of character than me, baby. Richard smiled. There's one more thing. If you'll allow me, I want to offer you a position, not as a cleaner. As director of a new employee wellness program I'm launching at Kane Global. Maya's eyes widened. What? I want you to help design a system that makes sure no one ever goes unseen again, especially the people who keep the lights on and the floors clean. I want you to be the one to rebuild what I let rot. She stared at him, speechless. You said something last night, he continued, about not just needing help, but needing to be seen. That stayed with me. Her fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. I'm not qualified for something like that. You are, he said, stepping closer. Because you understand. You know what it's like to be invisible. And now you have the power to change that for others. Maya looked at Daisy, then back at Richard. I need time to think, she said. Of course, he replied. Take all the time you need. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. And Maya, he said softly, you saved me once. Maybe this is my chance to return the favor. When he was gone, Maya lay back against the pillows, the formal statement still in her hand. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was the beginning. 2 days later, Maya stepped through the door of her new apartment for the first time. Her legs still trembled from the days in the hospital, and her right hand was wrapped in gauze from where the IV had sat for nearly 48 hours. But none of that mattered now. She stood in silence for a long moment, staring into the softly lit living room. There was no peeling paint, no flickering overhead bulb, no busted heater in the corner gasping for life. Instead, there was a beige couch with clean cushions, a low wooden table, soft carpet under her shoes, and curtains that actually matched. The entire space smelled of lemon and something warm, fresh linen, maybe. Daisy ran past her with wide eyes, giggling. We have our own kitchen. Mama, look. There's even cereal in the cabinet. Maya blinked back the sting in her eyes. Elena, her mother, followed slowly behind with the help of a walker provided by the private hospital. Her back still hunched, her legs stiff, but her eyes were sharper than they'd been in weeks. Well, I'll be damned, Elena murmured. I ain't seen a place this clean since your Aunt Charlene's wedding. Maya let out a soft laugh, the sound cracking with emotion. They stepped inside together, closing the door behind them, like sealing off a chapter of their lives. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like they were intruding on a space that wasn't theirs. This was theirs. A welcome packet sat on the counter with her name on it. Next to it, a small vase of white daisies. There was a note card tucked beneath it. You deserve peace. R.K. Maya folded the card, holding it briefly to her chest. In the days since the hospital, she hadn't seen Richard Kane again in person, but his presence lingered in everything. The private medical care, the moving service, the therapy appointments already scheduled for Daisy, the job offer still waiting in her inbox. He hadn't pressured her. He'd simply made space for her to choose. And right now, that meant everything. She stepped into the kitchen, where stainless steel appliances gleamed. A loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and a dozen eggs sat neatly in the fridge, more than she'd had in weeks. Daisy opened a pantry drawer and pulled out a box of crayons. There's paper too. Mama, I can draw pictures again. Elena sat slowly at the breakfast bar and looked around the room. Girl, you sure this ain't some kind of trap? Ain't no landlord ever this generous unless they want something back. Maya turned to her. He's not asking for anything. Her mother gave her a long, skeptical look. No man gives this much without expecting something eventually. Maya was quiet for a moment, then said, He doesn't owe me kindness. He owes me justice. And maybe this is his way of giving it. Elena grunted. Justice would have come before they dragged your name through the mud. Not after. Maya didn't argue. She couldn't. She walked into the small bedroom at the end of the hall. A queen-sized bed with clean sheets. A dresser. A lamp. No moldy windows. No chipped corners. A small stack of books sat on the nightstand, titles about leadership, wellness in the workplace, and even one about surviving public scandal. A post-it note on the cover of that last one simply read, Page 47. It helped me. RK. Maya smiled faintly and sat on the edge of the bed, fingers grazing the quilt. Daisy called from the living room. Can I go see the garden downstairs? Later, baby, Maya replied. We've got a lot to unpack. Elena slowly wheeled herself to the doorframe. You think you're going to take that job? Maya looked up at her mother. I don't know, she admitted. It scares me. You faced a man dying on the floor and didn't flinch. But a desk job got you scared? Elena raised an eyebrow. It's not the work, Maya said quietly. It's being visible. Her mother's voice softened. Maybe being seen is the bravest thing of all. That night, after Daisy had fallen asleep in her own bed, a twin-sized one with dinosaur sheets she'd chosen from a catalog, and her mother had retired to the guest room, Maya stepped out onto the small balcony. The city lights shimmered in the distance. Not so far as to feel foreign, but distant enough to remind her of how far she'd come in a matter of days. She sat on a wicker chair, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, her mind swirling. The injustice still haunted her. The online rumors hadn't disappeared. People still whispered her name in grocery stores. Her phone still buzzed with the occasional anonymous message. But here, in this quiet moment, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Not safety, not yet, but possibility. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from Richard Kane. No pressure. But I'd be honored if you'd visit the new office space. It's yours to design. Whatever you dream, start there. Below it was a photo attachment, an empty office floor with wide windows, sunlight pouring in, fresh paint, blank walls, clean floors waiting for new footsteps. Maya stared at it for a long time. She could picture it, a place where no janitor had to enter through the back door, where wellness meant more than fruit in the break room, where voices like hers weren't just tolerated, they were needed. She tapped a reply. I'll come see it, one step at a time. Her fingers hovered before she added, Thank you for giving me room to breathe. She put the phone down, leaned back, and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. The following Monday, Maya stood in front of a gleaming glass building in River North, where the breeze carried the scent of roasted coffee from a nearby cafe, and the sidewalks gleamed like they'd just been washed by a spring rain. She adjusted her scarf and looked up at the sign that read, Kane Global, Executive Annex. The building didn't carry the weight of intimidation that the original tower did. This one was newer, quieter, tucked into a street where professionals strolled with purpose, but not pretense. Natalie had texted her the address and simply said, 3rd floor, elevator to the right. He'll be waiting. Maya's palms were sweating. She told herself this was just a visit, a tour, nothing more. But as she stepped into the lobby, every eye seemed to follow her, not with suspicion, but with recognition. The security guard nodded gently. A receptionist offered a smile. It was the kind of polite acknowledgement she never used to receive. She stepped into the elevator. The doors slid closed. As it ascended, she exhaled slowly, trying to settle the knot in her stomach. It wasn't just nerves. It was the weight of every day she had walked into a building and been ignored. Of every hallway where her footsteps were the only ones that didn't echo with purpose. The elevator chimed. She stepped out onto a bright, open floor, completely empty. No cubicles, no partitions, just sunlight, a view of the river, and at the far end, Richard Kane, standing by the windows with a cup of coffee in hand. He turned the moment she stepped in. I was starting to wonder if you'd changed your mind, he said with a smile that didn't push. I almost did, Maya replied honestly. Twice, before I even left the house. I get that, he said, setting the cup down on a windowsill. But I'm glad you came. Mo. She walked slowly across the open space, her footsteps echoing against polished concrete. This place feels different, she said. Less cold. less corporate. That's intentional, he replied. This floor is yours, if you want it. For the new department. Maya raised an eyebrow. Still trying to get me to take the job, huh? He smiled, this time with a touch of humility. I'm not trying to get you to do anything. I just want you to know the door's open, and that if anyone should be designing a wellness program, it's someone who knows what it's like to be overlooked. She walked to the nearest window, her eyes drifting to the view. The river glinted in the Sunday boats passed beneath arched bridges. A train rumbled in the distance. I've never had an office, she said quietly. The only keys I've ever had were to mop closets. Then it's about time, he said. Maya turned back to him, her voice cautious. I'm not a professional. I don't have degrees or titles. People will question why someone like me gets to build something in a place like this. Let them question it, he replied. You've earned this more than most. She studied him carefully. Richard Kane looked different than he had a week ago. The same pressed shirt, the same tailored slacks, but there was something softened in his face now, not weakened, opened, as if he was finally letting the world touch him back. And what about you? She asked. Why are you really doing this? He didn't flinch. Because when I was lying on that floor, dying, I realized I hadn't earned half the respect people gave me. Not like you did. And because power without responsibility is just vanity. I've had enough of that. She nodded slowly. They stood in silence for a beat, sunlight washing over them both. Would you like to see the design plans? He asked. I'd rather build my own, she said. His smile widened. Even better. No. He walked over to a cabinet in the corner and pulled out a thick sketch pad, a set of fine markers, and laid them on a high table in the center of the room. All yours. Maya approached the table and opened the first page, blank. She let her fingers hover over it for a moment. Then she picked up a marker. I want windows in every office, she said aloud. Real light. No more boxed. In break rooms that feel like broom closets. Richard pulled out a stool. Noted. And I want a wellness fund for transportation, childcare, rent assistance when needed, not just yoga classes. He chuckled. You drive a hard bargain. I'm not bargaining, Maya said, eyes focused on the page. I'm building. By the time she looked up, an hour had passed. A rough sketch of an open plan layout filled the first few pages, spaces labeled restroom, support counseling, child visit room. Small touches that came from years of watching working-class people break quietly under the pressure of being invisible. Richard had listened the entire time, only speaking when asked. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct. He just watched her come alive in a room built for her voice. As she packed her things, he asked, So, does that mean you're saying yes? She paused, one hand on the strap of her purse. I'm saying yes, she said. Not because I want to work for you, but because I want to work for the people you forgot. People like me. His nod was quiet, respectful. That's the best yes I've heard in a long time. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Thank you, Richard, she said, her voice softer now, not just for the job, for seeing me. I should have done it sooner, he replied. She gave him a small smile. We all see things too late sometimes. What matters is what we do next. Oh. That night, back in her apartment, Maya sat with Daisy on the couch, eating bowls of macaroni and cheese, the fancy kind with real cheese packets. The city lights blinked gently through the window. You look happy, Mama, Daisy said between bites. Maya smiled. I think I am. At precisely 8:42 a.m., the next morning, Maya walked into Kane Global's executive annex for her first official day. The elevator ride felt less daunting this time, her reflection in the mirrored walls not one of a cleaner hoping to go unnoticed but of a woman claiming her place. She wore a simple navy blouse, slacks that actually fit, and her natural curls pinned into a soft twist at the crown. A delicate chain around her neck held a locket Daisy had given her. Inside, a tiny note written in crayon, You're brave, Mama. When the elevator doors opened, she was greeted not by Richard, but by Natalie, tall, sharp, and as composed as ever in a gray blazer. Good morning, Miss Williams, Natalie said with a warm smile. Maya, please. Then you'll have to call me Natalie. Come, I'll show you around. The office space had changed overnight. Glass partitions had been installed, sleek but not sterile. Colorful ergonomic chairs lined an open bullpen. One side of the floor was cordoned off for break areas, another for private counseling rooms that had yet to be furnished. In the corner, a whiteboard glowed with a bold message, "Wellness isn't a luxury, it's a right." Maya froze when she saw it. "You wrote that?" she asked Natalie. Natalie shook her head. "Richard did. Said it came from something you said in the hospital." Maya felt her throat tighten. She looked around the space hers, now, not because someone gave it to her, but because she'd earned the right to lead it. "Where is he?" "Meeting with legal about Edmund Ross." Maya blinked. "He's still around?" "Not for long," Natalie said, her tone clipped. "Turns out, Edmund's been covering more than your incident. HR just opened an investigation into his misuse of discretionary funds, expense fraud, and a pattern of silencing employee complaints." Maya's breath caught. "And he's still walking free?" "For now, but not for long. Richard wants it handled by the book. Clean." Maya nodded slowly. "Good. Let him fall the right way." Natalie led her to her office, a corner space with sunlight flooding in through two massive windows. A long wooden desk. Bookshelves lining one wall. A pinboard with staff feedback suggestions already posted. She was stunned to see one card that read, "If Maya's running things, I finally believe change is real." She set her bag down. "Thank you, Natalie," Maya said sincerely. Natalie gave her a look, something that hovered between admiration and apology. "You deserve more than just a thank you, but we'll start there." After Natalie left, Maya took a few quiet moments alone. She sat at her desk, ran her hand over the smooth surface, and allowed herself a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since the day she was fired. She opened her laptop and began drafting her first internal memo, but not everyone was thrilled. Across town, in a dimly lit conference room of a